Sheilah is a social development planner. She obtained her PhD from the London School of Economics and went on to gain experience as a senior academic and consultant. She has worked in several countries in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas for national governments, private and non-profit sectors, as well as aid agencies and development foundations. She joined the DPU in 1990, where she launched and directed the MSc in Social Development Practice.
I should start off by saying that Pat Meikle always used to call all the staff together and all the students at the beginning of every year, and everybody said where they came from and what their background was. Mm-hmm. And I was one of very few at the DPU who could say I was born in England.
The exotic one.
Yes, the exotic one in the group.
Could you tell us the experience you had before coming to the DPU?
By my early 30s, I had quite a breadth of experience. I had local central government and a new town experience. I also had a little bit of teaching because I did some part-time teaching in the evening at what was then the North London Polytechnic. I taught social methods to planners. And one day, it was a day like this, I was sitting reading The Guardian and there was an advert and it said, there is a vacancy at Robert Matthew Johnson Marshall and Partners, who was a architectural planning consultancy. I had the interview and I got the job, and that interview changed my life completely. We made as a firm an competition to Egypt to get work to undertake the Suez Master Plan in Egypt, and the firm got the work. I went out for 2 weeks to help them set up the office, and then I went every other month for 3 years. So that was the change of my life. I worked on the Suez Master Plan and I worked on the Suez Regional Plan. As a result of working on that, I really started to question the nature of aid, quotes, of development aid, and the way it was delivered and managed. And I really was not happy with this business of development assistance.
And your PhD was related to this, right?
My PhD really was all about the management of development assistance, so it was very relevant.
Then you joined the DPU in 1990. What did it offer which was different? And also, more personally, how did you see yourself within it?
Well, the thing that the DPU offered at that time that I don't think anybody else was doing at the time, although they've caught up now, was that it was, as I say, very much more a training institution rather than an academic institution, although it was just on the cusp. And they trained people, who were funded by the British Council and all sorts of people. They also went into the field, not everybody, but people like Pat and Baba. Working with the DPU that was based in the UK and in London, I felt I had something to offer. I'd worked by this time for a number of years in the field. I'd done some research, I'd done my PhD, and I thought I had something to bring. And one of the things that I wanted to bring wasn't just knowledge and experience and share that, but I wanted to give people confidence that they should be the leaders. It's their country and it's their life. And when they go home, I wanted very much that they had to be in charge. So if they were working with the World Bank or somebody on a project, at the end of the day, they should be questioning what was being done and not be afraid, if they were sufficiently senior, to question those funding organisations and put themselves in the driving seat.
Can you tell us about the courses you taught?
I actually joined originally because at that time the DPU had two things going. It was the diploma course was the key course. They'd only just started a master's programme, and I really joined to work with Baba on the diploma course because all my experience, I had lots of practical field experience. I was credible academically because by then I had my PhD, but I had lots of field experience. So I was really good to work on the diploma course with Baba, and Baba and I got on very well together, and we had a very similar approach. And this business about the role of local people in managing development assistance, we were very compatible on that sort of thing. As to be fair, all of the DPU were at that time, and I imagine still are.
In terms of the subject matter that you were teaching?
Well, in terms of the subject matter, I became more and more, I have as you know, a first degree in sociology, and I ended up by starting the Masters in Social Development Practice. I set that up and I managed that. I was the director on that for a number of years. So I became more social development focused. I was never a physical planner. I had a master's, but I always had a social hat on. And when I was on these committees at the RTPI before I joined the DPU, my fight was always trying to bring social into planning. And that's really what I was also trying to do when I worked on the international committee. It was bringing international and social. I was always aware of the tension, as I've just said to you, between social policy and economic process and policy. And of course, it was all about the Washington Consensus and stuff when I started. And I was always fighting. That's what the context I was operating in. Before I set up the master's course in social development, I used to run a certificate course, and we also ran short courses, and we talked about structural adjustment. And I felt that all this imposition, it's a bit like the austerity thing now, that what are you going to do? You're going to cut back on the expenditure in the social, in the government, public sector, you're going to cut back on education, or it was a very similar sort of programme. And I felt that this could be much more socially sensitive in its approach, and a lot of the pain would be mitigated if it was thought about in advance and handled in certain ways. And a number of things came together. One, I was teaching it because it came up. I could not teach it as a social development type person. It was very much on my agenda. But also, I was invited to go to Tanzania as part of a they called it a two-man mission. I will call it a two-person mission, to work with the ministry, the government there, first half of the 90s certainly. What had happened, people had begun to realise in the aid community that structural adjustment was an issue. And the World Bank, who were very instrumental in all of this, were determined to train people in structural adjustment and what it meant. So they were going around, they funded a lot of training in a lot of countries. The only country that refused to accept their training was Tanzania. And they accepted money from the UN to undertake socially sensitive structural adjustment. Well, it wasn't called then. Initially, when I first was invited, it was for the UN to train them in structural adjustment. And because of DPU connections and my past experiences in Tanzania, I was invited to go on this visit to Tanzania. So as a result of that, Kagoda and I designed this thing, right? And it was published. And I went out on a number of occasions to use it in Tanzania, training all sorts of people, from senior civil servants. I think we trained a couple of ministers, people in NGO, in CBOs and so on, a whole range of people. And I was also asked to go to the UN in New York, and I went twice to the UN in New York and used the manual to train their staff as well. So it was quite an instrumental manual.
You also added to the Rural Livelihood Framework. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
DPU was asked to urbanise the Rural Livelihoods Framework, which DFID was using, and I was the one that did that. And that was also important. And I continue to use that now in the work that I've been doing and in my voluntary work running this NGO. I used it in a lot of places, and it tied in with social impact and the impact of development. So, for example, I used it in Kabul. I went to do an evaluation of a UNDP project. I think it's a very useful tool when you're talking about social development. So I'm not talking as a theoretician here. You can see that my practical work has always fed into my teaching and my academic work.
Finally, Sheilah, what are the challenges for urbanization today, and where should we focus our research?
I think a really important thing for social policy and so on is the financial crisis we've just been through and the collapse of neoliberalism. I think that is superb for the learning and application of social policy and social development. Unfortunately, I don't see any evidence that UK politicians have learnt from this experience. In a way, it's history rewriting the 70s. Not entirely, but in the 70s we had austerity and we had structural adjustment. And here we have a very similar thing in the UK, but outside the UK. It sort of demonstrates that we don't have the answer to everything. To say that we have feet of clay is perhaps a bit extreme, but it tells people outside, actually, these people that come and give you money and tell you what to do haven't got the look at them at home. That's the way I would teach it. And I think what is really good about it, I really believe, from my experience in the field, that one should work as a team. People going in from outside with money is great, and people there as well. I'm not saying it's all one or all the other. My idealism is that we're integrated and that we share our experience and knowledge. So it's quite good, I think, that those who are giving the money, quotes, are being challenged by the fact that they haven't had complete success at home.